Now, you've been out there, you've been up and down the country at various campaigning meetings in the last week. What do you feel the mood is like? Others are reporting, I get the sense that the mob is virtually at the gates. They are so incandescent with anger and angrier at Labour than they are at anybody else.
Well, I think that there is particular reason for people in the Labour Party to feel really dismayed by what's gone on. And there's no doubt, you know, it's been expressed to me very, very strongly by Labour Party members, because the Labour Party is about standing up for people who have to struggle to make ends meet even at the best of times, and therefore there's a big disappointment that this has happened. Now, this is not confined to Labour members of Parliament, it covers members of Parliament of all parties, but I think Labour Party members feel particularly keenly about it and feel particularly disappointed, and that's why it's right that the processes of the party, both within the Parliamentary Labour Party, where a number of members have already had their membership of the Parliamentary Labour Party suspended, but also next week the National Executive Committee's panel, which will consider whether or not people are eligible to stand for election again as Labour Party candidates, will start its work.
How are they going to do that? How are they going to decide? I mean, you've had on the one hand, you've had the Prime Minister saying Hazel Blear's behaviour is totally unacceptable, and then saying she has his full backing, he's Downing Street says has his full backing to stay in the Cabinet. So how is this committee going to decide between, all right, some people may have actually committed fraud, she may be borderline case, who knows, but an awful lot of other people say we were only obeying the rules, and yet people are sickened at the amount of money that they've taken. How does any committee decide where the line falls?
Well, as far as the reassessment process is concerned, which is going to be undertaken independently and is going to apply to all members of Parliament, that will be simply the straightforward issue of, was the payout within the rules, or was it actually, for example, the payment of a mortgage that wasn't existing? So, or was it a payment?
That's easy.
Yes.
Well, what about the ones in the rules,
okay,
yet they stick?
Yeah. So as far as the payment outside the rules is concerned, that is going to apply to all members of the House of Commons, and there will be a payback system. I think it's important that if the rules were broken, that the money is paid back.
Hazel Blear's people appear to have come out and said we still support her, whereas the rest of the country, seeing her writing a cheque for capital gains tax for 13,000, think this won't do, and Gordon Brown himself has said totally unacceptable. So does it mean someone like that might well be deselected from the top, whatever their local party says?
Well, there's a number of ways that people can be referred to this panel, which has been set up specifically for this person, but under the existing rules, and it will start next week. But as far as the question of members of government is concerned, and I don't want to bog everybody down with process, but again, that is simply a matter for the Prime Minister, and he will decide who he wants in his team at any one time to do their work as ministers. So I think that the overarching point is that every single member of the House of Commons has got to be able to be confidently able to say, only, you know, we've either only claimed within the rules or we've paid the money back. We all need to be able to say, as we now can, all the rules have been tightened up and there's going to be whole-scale root and branch reform. That's across all parties. And then within each of the parties, there are separate disciplinary arrangements. In the Labour Party, we're taking this issue very, very seriously indeed.
Do you expect a lot of heads to roll?
Well, I think that there will undoubtedly be people not standing at the next election who might otherwise have decided to do so. That is already evidently the case. And I think that I can't give you any sense of numbers or proportion, but just to say that we know the public expect high standards. We know that particularly in the Labour Party. We're all in politics not for ourselves, but to make a difference. That's what the party expect of us.
But David Cameron has really stolen the march on this. I mean, he's knocking heads off every day. Grandees claiming for moats and ducks and tennis courts, goodness knows what else. Heads are rolling. The public are seeing that happen. There's no doubt at all from the opinion polls and everywhere else, people think Cameron has been strong and decisive, whereas the Labour Party, and Gordon Brown in particular, look weak and vague and oscillating and talking about committees and waiting for due process. Do you not think a few heads rolling, a bit of bloodletting is actually what the mobs out there are howling for?
Well, I don't accept that for a moment. And I think that it is important that when allegations are made, action is taken, but that there is an orderly and fair process. And it's not for the leader of our party to be able to just say, I am personally going to decide who is going to stand at the next election. That is rightly the responsibility of the party. It is the responsibility of the Prime Minister to choose his cabinet. But I don't think that this really, rightfully, is a question of competition as between the parties as to which party leader can chop more heads off. This is something which has actually affected all parties, and therefore all parties separately will have to take the approach they think right to deal with it.
Of this. Whatever the niceties of process, Cameron is winning hands down. He says, up with this, I will not put, this person won't stand again. Never mind due process. Because in fact, a leader of the party can so intimidate somebody that they pretty much know the game's up before he actually have to go through due process. Don't you think that Gordon Brown could have done a bit more of that with some of the more egregious cases?
I think the last thing that the public need, having seen something affect all parties, is to be subjected to a party political point scoring on it. This is actually something that's affected all parties. All parties need to work together to sort out the situation in the House of Commons, and each party needs to sort out the issue in respect of their own candidates. And as far as we're concerned, we will have an expeditious but also a fair process which requires the highest standards of our MPs and future candidates.
What do you think is going to happen from now on? If at these June elections, it looks as if from all the polls, Labour is going to do somewhere between very badly to catastrophically. Do you think that Labour will soldier on with such a damaged leader? It seems that everything that comes, a lot of the problems have been of his own making. The Damien McBride scandal, surrounding himself with some pretty dark and thuggish characters. The Royal Mail, the Gurkhas, these are all things that he could have sidestepped and avoided. Do you really think that the party is going to tolerate carrying on for its final year with a leader quite as damaged as he is?
I think what the party is thinking about at the moment is that every single voter in England, Scotland and Wales will have a vote on June the 4th, and indeed the postal votes will be going out from this weekend and thereafter. So that what they're thinking about is how can we make sure that we get as many people as possible to vote, and how can we make sure that we get people to listen to our argument about how we've stood by people in difficult economic times, we've taken the action to protect businesses and jobs and their homes. And that is what Labour Party members will be thinking about. And as Deputy Leader of the party, that's what I'll be campaigning on next week. And it's not any bit of my job to be saying, it's all going to be awful on June the 4th, and therefore what should we do afterwards, after a bad result? We've got to be out there campaigning, which we will be using the recess next week to do, to make sure that we get everybody to vote, not least because if we have a low turnout, it provides an opportunity for what is another serious, I would say, political threat to our democracy, and that's the election of the British National Party.
The Labour List website conducted a poll of Labour activists. 66% said they thought Gordon Brown should go and they would do better with somebody else. That's, you know, Labour activists on a Labour website. Do you not think there will be a great groundswell of saying, you know, we've absolutely had it with Gordon Brown, we've got to try something better?
Well, I think that the party members strongly support the strategy that Gordon Brown has set out and led forward on in the biggest challenge that there's been to people's living standards and prospect in this country, which is the global economic crisis. And they know that he immediately identified what the potential threats were. He took the action, the big action of nationalising banks, injecting money into the economy, having an industrial activism strategy, so we intervene to protect business, and that action has been then consistently stuck to and also followed by other countries. In contrast, the party members see David Cameron and the Conservatives having no answers on these questions. Now, obviously the Conservatives have every interest in there being no discussion about people's living standards, their jobs, the prospects for businesses and people's homes. But that's what we're elected to do, to protect people and their future, to help them now and give them real hope for the future.
But just supposing it happens, supposing Gordon Brown falls, supposing he is toppled, supposing the will of the party is, I mean, you may think it won't happen, have you absolutely, or supposing the proverbial bus were to run him over, have you absolutely, totally and utterly ruled out any possibility of yourself standing ever for the leadership?
Well, I'm not going to say anything further than what I've already said on that. And as for these questions, I mean, if somebody
but you said no. You said you said in no circumstances.
Absolutely. I've said, I've said what I've said, and I'm not even going to re-say it because I've said it and it's not an issue. But I would say that just as if somebody was questioning the chair of my local constituency party and they were saying, if and when Harriet's not standing at some future time, would you be prepared to put yourself forward? I would think that's not the point. I'm the Member of Parliament. We should all be working together to take our message to the people of Camberwell and Peckham. And I would say to you, Polly, go right ahead and do whatever speculating you want, but don't ask me to engage in that. I'm elected to be deputy leader. Gordon is our elected leader. I'm supporting him. The party's got an important job to do, and I'm not going to get into any of that speculation.
When it comes to making important decisions about the party's future, you speak with a hugely powerful voice because you're not speaking as someone who's trying to position yourself, but someone who's speaking for your party. So, for instance, when it comes to perhaps the Labour Party should go for proportional representation, your voice will be immensely powerful. Will you speak up for proportional representation and say, actually, what the people out there are really angry about is the stranglehold of the old two-party system. Nobody can enter politics because the old parties stand in the way. Nobody can start up a new party. No breath of fresh air in this stuffy old place. Would you be supporting proportional representation and say we need a real break with the past, and that may mean a break with the old two-party system too?
Your proposition, which is we have been presiding over monolithic, centralised, two-party power politics, I do not accept for 1 minute, not only because of devolution, but because we've given people the right to know with the Freedom of Information Act, we've given people's rights constitutional backing with the Human Rights Act. So I don't accept your assertion, and I've said that I think that we do need a wider process, which will include the questions of the absolute fundamentals of our democracy here in Westminster.
You did promise a referendum. Can we have one at the election?
We didn't,
a lot of people wanted
we didn't. No, Polly, we did not promise a referendum. What we said is we wouldn't bring in any change without we asked the British people to do that. So we didn't actually say, yes, we're going to do one. I mean, that's
it was a commitment to no change?
No, it was a commitment that if we did change, if we were proposing a change, we would ask the British people for their support for it. We wouldn't kind of do it over their heads. This is, just a minor point.
Isn't now the time?
Well, now is the time for a wider debate to make sure that people feel not only have we tackled the immediate problems around allowances, not only have we reassured people that we won't be setting our own pay and allowances in the future, it'll be set independently by statute, but also we can have a wider debate about things which have often been on the margins of political importance, but are now central.
If you sense that the will of the party is that there really needs to be profound change, constitutional and possibly getting rid of the leader as well in time to have a better run at the next election, would you be the one who'd be best placed to stand up and say, this is what I'm hearing from the party, this is the message I'm delivering back to the centre, these two important changes have to happen?
Yes, of course, I am a conduit between the party members, and I have the opportunity, which a number of members of the Cabinet don't have, I don't have to have security or anything like that. I can be out and about and just listening to people and carrying those messages back. Party members are disappointed. They want us to be doing better. They believe that we're charting the right course, but they want us to make it clearer what we're doing. They want us to do more. They want us to do better.
Do you think the Cabinet really gets it about quite how serious this crisis is and how angry the people are and how much pressure there is for really radical reform? I mean, a big constitutional convention a real shake-up of this place. Do you think they're up for it, or is it still a great deal, someone like Jack Straw, extraordinarily conservative with a small c, about changing any of the old practices of this place and certainly the electoral system?
Well,
are they really willing to change their minds and think again, given that the turmoil that's going on out there?
Polly, I wouldn't write off as conservative everybody who doesn't completely agree with the agenda which you have principally and consistently espoused. It's not true to say that we are, you know, conservative in our approach. And yes, I think the Cabinet does get how angry people are and what the need for change is and the need for reassurance. But actually, it's not for us to just say, my goodness me, how angry people are, how badly we feel about it, let's wring our hands. We have to recognise the scale of the challenge that is faced to our democracy because of people's anger and concern, and we have to act on it. And we are acting on it both with the reparation, with the reassurance about the current situation, and renewal for the future.